Hi everyone, this is Ali Hussein Kassim of Ali Talks Tech. In this week's weekly roundup, I'm covering three interesting stories, and incidentally, all these stories about fintech this time, nothing else. The first story I'm looking at is KCB's latest announcement of a minority acquisition stake in Pesapal. Pesapal is one of the oldest fintechs, 17 plus years old in Kenya and now covering several African countries. Quite interesting because this is the second acquisition this year by KCB Bank Group, and the first acquisition was back in March with Riverbank. So I'll be covering this story in a little bit more detail shortly. The next story is about the fintech powerhouse that you've never heard of, probably never heard of. I mean, even many in the tech or fintech ecosystem has probably never heard of this name. And this powerhouse is called Juba Express. We'll talk about that in a minute, but this is on the remittance play. I think this is an interesting infrastructure play in remittances. Jibril Mohammed, the chairman, and his team has built an absolutely interesting fintech. And wait for it, no VC funding, zero. Last, we're going to speak to the interesting conversations around dominance in mobile money, in banking, in fintech across the board. So let's get back to KCB's play. In March, KCB announced a 75% acquisition of Riverbank. Riverbank's main focus is agency banking and enabling payments or not investments, payments, C2G, consumer or citizen to government. They have perfected that play, especially with counties in Kenya. And now the latest story a couple of days ago, KCB announced a minority stake in Pesapal. So what's the connection here? First, let's step back as KCB and let's look at this bank that has decided they are going to get onto the acquisition trail for fintech. KCB is one of the largest banks in Eastern Central Africa with footprint in about 6 or 7 countries, not sure. I think it's 6. DRC, Kenya, South Sudan, Tanzania. And this acquisition we're starting to see a pattern. And what's the pattern? First, let's look at this is an infrastructure play. You are talking first about agency banking. Agency banking has become one of the most important areas that has enabled and driven financial inclusion in this part of the world. It has also helped some of the largest banks in East Africa, as KCB, Equity, Coop Bank, to mop up quite a lot of deposits from areas and regions that they may have found difficult to set up a branch. So the digital transformation or dual transformation of banks in Kenya is an interesting space to really start looking at and drill in. So agency banking, now they're owning the space and speaking to people on the ground. KCB is already opening up their agency banking platform to other banks, SACCOs, and everybody else. This is not just something that is exclusive to KCB. Equity Bank has also done that play for several years now. But now let's look at the minority stake in Pesapal. Now, if you're like me, if you're a Kenyan and you've walked around in shops, in supermarkets, in hotels, there's one thing that I'm starting to find almost as ubiquitous as M-Pesa. And that's the Pesapal PDQ. The Sabi, I think Lico calls it the Sabi brand. This ubiquity in payments at the shop front has become a signature play for Pesapal. And this has actually been enabled by their partnership with KCB. So honestly, I saw this coming from afar. I didn't think it will happen so fast. You have a bank that now has agency banking as a key component in their infrastructure. And then you have Pesapal that has now entered into the sphere of influence, if you may allow me to call it that, of KCB. And I'm going to start thinking around possible exclusivity in this space when it comes to banking services with Pesapal. It's very, very interesting to see how these three plays are actually coming together. With agency banking, with the PDQ play, are we starting to see a combination of a one platform play where you can go in, make payments, do your agency banking play within the same ecosystem? I would say kudos to Poruso. Kudos to my good friends Nick Mwenda and Augusto Lico for getting into these conversations with one of the largest banks in the region. It can only augur well for the ecosystem. This story is a continuing story. We will be covering it as we move along. Now, I want to speak to an interesting brand that myself, that I have been in the tech ecosystem for many years, have just recently started digging into and starting to figure out what these guys are all about. And I'm talking about Juba Express. This is, by all intents and purposes, a global money transfer operator that has quietly, steadfastly, and very strategically built rails, cobble them together directly or with partners that they can now serve in Africa alone, 40 plus African countries you can send money from. In the world, you can send on the Juba Express platform to 135 countries directly. And a little bird tells me that they're about to sign another agreement with a global infrastructure player that will expand this to most countries in the world. For me, there are a few lessons here. Lesson number one, how to build quietly and diligently with local capital. I have never had, sitting with Jibril Mohammed and his team, I've never had conversations around, the usual conversations as guys in fintech and tech love to talk about, uh, bond rates, how much money have you raised, from which VC, we are looking to raise another round. These guys have painstakingly built through a network of investors who are fairly well known to them. They have partnerships that any financial services brand can salivate for. Quietly, diligently, and with so much ethical thought process that sometimes I shake my head. I shake my head and I'm like, you guys are not for real. But what you see with these guys is actually what you get. And here's the good news. They have now opened up their platform to other players to plug in. They have an SDK that you can plug and play. Jibril tells me you can do this within 3 days, depending on how you are structured as a financial services institution or brand internally to be able to consume that SDK. They have an API platform that you can plug in. It's ready to go. Guys, And what's most interesting, they are willing and able to structure the business models, the commercials around how you operate. So, guys, what are you waiting for? Pick up the phone and speak to these guys. These are the real deal when it comes to money remittances. And I'll be watching this brand closely as we move along. Last but not least, I want to talk about dominance and how you build dominance and how you get to a point where someone cannot ignore you. Even your competitors are scrambling to partner with you. And guys, I know we've talked about this. We've talked about this brand until we are blue in the face. But let me tell you guys, as day turns to night, the most crucial thing about building brands, fintech brands, mobile money brands, is one of consistency, one of focus with your customer, and one of enabling the ecosystem around you. There's a lot of pros and cons that come with M-Pesa, but I can tell you this. I can tell you this for free, and you can take this to the bank, no pun intended. Without the M-Pesa rails, we probably would not have such a flourishing fintech ecosystem in this part of the world. But the flip side of this that we need to start asking ourselves is this humongous success by M-Pesa. How is it starting? How has it enabled the ecosystem? Is it a positive? You have 80,000 plus software engineers plugging onto the Daraja platform, their API platform. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Are we becoming too reliant on M-Pesa rails that we've stopped innovating as a country? That's food for thought. What you can't take away from M-Pesa and Safaricom is what they have built to date. This story continues, guys. Looking forward to our next week's roundup. Asanteni sana.